When it comes to taking great looking pictures, it really does come down to the light, meaning how bright or how dark your subject is when you take the picture. Now with cameras, there's three basic ways to adjust the light or exposure of an image: aperture, ISO, and shutter speed. ISO and shutter speed deal with the camera and the sensor itself, whereas aperture focuses on the lens and how much light passes through it. And that's what we're going to focus on today: aperture, what it is, what it does, and how you can use it to make sure you get great looking pictures that are always in focus. Now, like I said, aperture deals with how much light passes through the lens and hits the sensor of the camera, and aperture is measured in f-stops. So basically, the lower the f-stop number, the more wide open the aperture becomes, and the higher the number, the more closed it becomes. So for example, I have a 50mm f1.1 lens here. Now the 1.1 just means how wide open it can get. And if I hold this up to the camera here, you can see all the way through it. This is what it looks like when it is wide open. This allows the most amount of light to come through. If I were to stop down or close the aperture, it would reduce how much light passes through the lens. So you might be wondering, when would I adjust the aperture? Well, obviously, if your picture is too dark, you want to open up the aperture to let more light in, and if it's too bright, you want to close it. Now, here's where things get interesting. Even though aperture, ISO, and shutter speed all affect the exposure of an image, they also affect other aspects of the image. Aperture, for example, controls the depth of field, meaning how much of your image is in focus and how much is out of focus. Now, the more you open up your aperture, the more shallow your depth of field becomes. So what exactly does this mean? Well, if you're taking a portrait and you're focused on someone's eyes, then their eyes will be in focus, but everything else will start to blur out or get out of focus as you move forward or behind the eyes. Now, this can be a good or bad thing. The good thing is, when you have a shallow depth of field, it can help reduce fine lines and blemishes in the skin, making a more pleasing image. Now, the bad thing is, because you have such a shallow depth of field, if you or your subject move, then it can throw off the focus of the picture, resulting in you focusing on something other than their eyes. So you might be wondering, well, why would I ever shoot anything with my lens wide open if there's a greater chance that the picture is just going to be blurry? Well, you can actually get some really creative, artistic looks to your image as long as you know what you're doing. So the final question is probably, what's the best aperture to shoot anything? Well, it really comes down to what it is you're taking a picture of. Generally, if you're taking a picture of one person, you can have an aperture of f2.8 and lower. Again, it just depends how artistic you want to get with your picture. At f2.8, you can generally get most of someone's face in focus, as long as they aren't like jumping around or doing anything crazy. Now, if you're taking pictures of multiple people, like 2 or 3, then you definitely want to increase your f-stop number. An f-stop of 4.0 is usually a good place to start, but you can go higher if you want. Remember, the higher you go with your f-stop number, the deeper your depth of field becomes, meaning more of your image will be in focus. Now, what about landscape shots? Well, it really comes down to what you want people to focus on. If you want more of your image in focus, use a higher f-stop number. If you want people to focus on one particular thing in your image, then open up your aperture and use a lower f-stop number. Now remember, aperture works the same way no matter what camera you're using, whether it's a big camera like this, a small point and shoot, or even your cell phone camera. As long as you know what it is and how to use it, you'll be able to take great looking pictures that are always in focus.